Hey everybody, this is Dan, again, Urban Farms Manager. And I haven't been making a lot of videos lately since I've been out in the field a lot more often. But I wanted to take this opportunity to discuss tomato pruning. And it's maybe a little bit late in the season to be discussing this. I was a bit delayed, of course. But it's totally fine to start thinking about this now as well, because your tomatoes have probably grown quite a bit, as this one has. So I'm not in a SUS facility right now. I'm in a private vegetable garden that I'm just taking a look at. And to understand how to prune a tomato correctly, you kind of want to get a sense of how a tomato grows, the structure of a tomato plant. And for a determinate tomato, which we've discussed, they kind of just bush out, they grow to a certain size, they yield a certain amount of tomatoes, then they stop growing. The other kind of tomatoes are indeterminate tomatoes, which are, although they're not a true vine, they essentially just vine out. They just kind of keep growing until frost comes and they die, or the plant dies naturally. And they grow from the base up to a tip, and that tip just keeps growing. It comes off of the main stem, which will extend all the way down to the bottom of the plant. And whenever you get a tip, you will have usually a set of leaves that comes out. That set of leaves serves to, photosynthesize and feed the plant. It also actually helps to shade some of the tomatoes. You'll get these flower buds, those are where your tomatoes come from. And you'll also get, typically, this little guy here, which is called a sucker. And one of the best practices for pruning tomatoes really just involves pulling out those suckers. And sometimes you'll see this one is in that junction. You always get that junction in the middle. You grab the sucker and pull it out. And you can kind of just work your way down the plant, pulling out the suckers in all of those junctions, because all they are doing is just draining energy from the fruit, right? The main branch that comes out from the stem, that one is pulling the photosynthesis. It's shading the green tomatoes so they don't get sunburned. The suckers are all they're doing is just depleting energy. And you can pull them off like I did just by pinching them off. When they get larger, you can cut close to the base with scissors or a pair of pruning shears, but you want to be careful not to damage the plant, right? So you can cut close to the base, but make sure that it's a good, clean, sharp cut. And sometimes if you have, even if you have like a really long arm with tomatoes on it, especially later in the season, if it doesn't have a lot of tomatoes on it, or they're very small and not yet ripe, sometimes even though you lose those tomatoes, you might even want to cut that off too, just so more energy goes to ripen tomatoes that you currently have, especially if you're heading, if you're heading into a frost, or even if you just want to ripen your tomatoes quicker or make sure that they're getting more energy. The most important part is removing those suckers and making sure, I really like, another thing is just making sure that the plants are trellised as vertically as possible. I think it makes it way easier to prune them properly when they're trellised vertically. Okay, so very quick little course on tomato pruning there. If you have determinate tomatoes, which are not going to be vining and growing very tall, it's not as important, simply because there's sort of a they're not going to just continue growing. They'll yield the amount of tomatoes and then they'll kind of just stop yielding. You can continue to remove the suckers. It's not a bad practice. But there's not going to be nearly as many of them because they're just part of the nature of the plant. They're part of the structure of a vining indeterminate tomato. And in agricultural purposes, they don't really serve any purpose for us. All right? So stay safe, and I'll see you out there again soon.